I learned the hard way to get more damage in every game in World of Tanks, and today I'm going to showcase 3 brilliant examples from some great replays that will help you to improve how much damage you do every single game and hopefully win more games consistently so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. So in today's replays we have 3 very different styles of gameplay because of course not every single tank is the same, and so I wanted to showcase all types of tanks, both mediums, heavies and tank destroyers within this gameplay, but the tips that we've got are applicable to all of the tanks in the game, and hopefully you'll find some use in them and be able to apply them to your games to obviously get more damage and hopefully win some more. So first things first, we're seeing the Leopard, of course one of the best tier 10 mediums in the game, very versatile, able to have good DPM, very mobile and the ability to impact games. And it's a good way of representing all of the things that you can do. Now at the very start of this game you've seen quite a bit of health lost, and although you know there is this prestigious thing about keeping all of your health to the end of the games, in some games it can be worth actually pushing to be able to get damage. Now coming up to this spot right here can be very dangerous and is risky, but if you want to have the best damage games that you're possibly going to have, you do need to have some risk within your games. But in order to get here, the whole point is that when you are here you have some fantastic side shots and you can set up crossfires, and crossfires is one of the biggest things in World of Tanks that's going to be able to not only get you more damage but keep you alive for longer and also support your team so that you can then feed off of the tanks that you and your team are going to be finding out in the open or just targeting and focusing down within the game to of course win. Now from this spot you can see some really nice work against the Super Conqueror, getting in those slim shots, and if you can keep your gun firing you may not always hit every single one of your shells, but a shot not fired is gonna result in you not getting any damage. So you may as well fire. Of course there are some kind of limitations to that, in which, you know, if you think you're going to get spotted because you fire and it's probably not going to hit, then of course it's not worth doing if you're in a bit of a risky position. But if you aren't in a risky position and everyone knows that you're already in the place that you are, then you can just pre-aim, you can fire, and of course it's going to work out quite well for you if you do manage to pen. And that's how this player right here has been able to pick up 2,900 damage at the beginning of the game, and that's with a lot of tanks pushing the hill area. Now why has he been able to do that? Well, it's because of a combination of factors that rely both on the team support and being able to be very opportunistic with your shells, which medium tanks offer. Now not every tank is able to kind of quickly poke around a corner, have the accuracy to reliably hit the targets that you're hoping to hit and then come away with a decent chunk of damage at the end of it. But if you are in tanks like this, if you are used to playing medium tanks and you often sit at the back, you're sniping for a little bit too long, you're not really waiting for your teammate to kind of take a shell and then you're actually capitalizing on it, which is in essence the trading within the game, trading your teammates with medium tanks. And of course any tank is the best thing that you can do if you are trying to kind of help out your team the most. If a teammate is going to take a shell anyway, you may as well try and get a counter shell on the opponent that that has fired. If you can get a shot without taking any more, it's of course going to be very beneficial. The enemy tank is not going to be able to do anything to you and you're going to come away with a much better game. Now the next kind of little tip that I want to focus on is about future proofing your games, and I'm not talking about multiple games in a row, I'm talking about your specific game that you're in. And you can see here that he has picked up 6,000 damage at this point in the battle. You are 5.5 minutes in, and you know this would be a very good result. But how can you maximize that? Well, of course you're starting to run out of opponents, and a lot of people at this stage in the battle will still remain in the same sort of places that have or might have been working during the game so far. But when the damage runs out, there's nothing left to shoot. And although that hill where we've just seen is very powerful in the start of Tundra, it isn't the best place possible now in this game. And often you'll see that, you know, players who are less experienced will stay in the same spots that have worked and isn't necessarily an awful thing to do, but a lot of the time you'll miss out on so much damage when your team actually decide to push that you end up having a good game as opposed to a great or an insane game or one that was absolutely amazing. And that is what I think, and that is what most people find difficult within this game, is that, you know, that kind of thought process during the later half of the game, and when you get to that midpoint of the game, that kind of forces you to not now just go for easy damage because there's loads of tanks available for you to hit, but it's about kind of where should I be to be able to pick up the next amount of damage, even if I sacrifice that 200 damage which I might have been able to get at that, you know, safe position that is not going to yield you anything in the long run. And that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of future proofing. And so you've got to make sure you're mobilizing, and you can see here our player here is actually on the front foot, and not only are you going to be able to get actual damage when you're on the front foot like this, you're also going to be much better off in terms of spotting for your team, getting assistance damage, and of course every single time you reload, hopefully during this point in the game when you have been the first one forward, you're going to be able to fire again. And this is what allows you to go from the 5 or 6k damage game that we saw back then, from just playing very well and trading your teammates and having a good game, to having a game where you're picking up over 10,000 damage. And of course, yeah, a really good one for us to showcase in today's replay for number 1. Now, if you think I've missed anything so far, then be sure to let me know in the comment section down below some of the tips that you've found really imperative within the game that have helped you get more damage and be able to carry in your games, and essentially be able to have a bit more of an impact in the games that you play. I'd be really interested to see what you guys come up with as well in the comments, and of course it's going to help everyone watching as well. But in this game, we are, of course, looking at a heavy tank, and not just any heavy tank, a tier 9 German one that is very, very powerful within the game. And in fact, one of my favourite tier 9 heavies in the game, because it has both a decent gun, it has good armour to a degree for tier 9 heavy. Of course, premium rounds still kind of suck against it, but it is a great tank to really show off all sorts of things that you can do within this game. And of course, this replay is very good for that too. So number 1, what do you have to do when you're playing in tanks that maybe rely a little bit more on the alpha damage and being able to dish out larger chunks of damage in one go, and also rely on having the armor to be able to bounce some of the rounds from tanks that might have better DPM? And so there's a whole host of ways in which you can basically increase your damage, and one of the best ways that I found when playing in a tank like this to be able to increase the overall damage is to really take advantage of when people bounce off of you. And most people in the game, and I'm talking about like a generalization, I know a few people will know about it, and I mean it is common sense, but if a player bounces off you, that gives you the opportunity for X amount of time to understand that they're reloading, and therefore you can come around the corner and you can deal your damage to them. And wow, I mean, what a great tip. But what I mean by this is that a lot of players just sit there after they've been hit, or they moan about how they've got hit by someone, rather than going, well, I've been hit, or someone's bounced off me, what should I do now? Well, of course, the tank that's just bounced off of you is reloading. So what do? Well, you try and go for the damage, because they're not going to be able to do anything to you. And this doesn't work all of the time, because they may have some team support, so you have to be a little bit careful. But if you're good at keeping your awareness within the game, what you can do is you can watch the reloads of all of the different tanks to find that brief 3 or 4 second period where everyone has fired or has found themselves to have bounced. And you can see there the Ferdinand bounced off the E75. But one of the key things with the Ferdinand over the E75 is that it probably reloads quicker than this tank, but unfortunately for him, he's not looking at the E75, so he's not going to be able to deal any damage. So some people would have stayed back thinking, the tank actually reloads quicker than me, maybe, and so I can't really push him. But of course, if the tank isn't looking at you, then you can go round that corner, you can deal with the damage, which I think is very, very crucial for people to understand that, you know, a lot of the time people are scared too much within the game to really decide and make a kind of split second decision to actually go around or do something that is going to positively impact their game. And it's that hesitation that is the thing that changes a player from getting, you know, maybe just about getting a fire for effect in the game to being able to pick up double the hit points dealt to the amount that you've received, or even higher than that as you kind of work through the game. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons as to how you can improve your overall gameplay, but yeah, focusing on damage here, it's definitely one of the key things that I think personally that people do really badly within the game, and it's of course trading and knowing when to trade your teammates, like we talked about in the first one, and trading your own hit points as well. I mean, who'd have thought that if you take a round, you should probably be dealing a round to the person that shot you or someone else, so that you aren't going to be in a deficit, because if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with less damage than you've received, and of course hindering your team and therefore your chances of winning. So yeah, I mean, this game, really good example of what you need to do. And in the late hand stages of the game, you've got to be able to make a decision. And you can see here, he's made the decision. Does he want to deal with an E75 at the moment on the team and then have two lightly armoured vehicles, but have very good speed and mobility to be able to get from behind him? Absolutely not. It's time to remove the low health vehicles from the game, including the RU251 and the 430. Now that they're out of the game, you can then deal damage against one-on-one against an E75, and he did actually kind of rush the shell on the enemy E75, which kind of sucks, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And now the enemy E75 rushes his shot, and looks like he's now going to be in a bit of a sticky situation. So what do you do in this sort of scenario, you know, where you are at a hit point disadvantage? Well, one of the key things that you can do is learn that you can actually put your barrel in the barrel of an enemy tank to avoid taking a shell, because they will essentially hit your gun. And although this may not work every single time, I know that, it can certainly work some of the time, and you can end up bouncing quite a few rounds by doing this, as well as the fact that when you're in this one-on-one engagement where you are up against basically the same tank, what you need to do is be able to kind of keep in the thought process of how can you best out-trade this opponent, whilst also giving you the best opportunity to potentially bounce around. And yeah, unfortunately it didn't end up well here, but there is only so much you can do in that sort of scenario, and especially when the E75 had that extra bit of hit points. But of course, if he'd just stayed calm at the beginning, he would have been able to maybe hit the lower plate of the E75 as he came over the hill, and he would have won. But you know, we can't really complain too much about that. And of course, a fantastic result in this tier 9 heavy, and it's all down to the fact of that trading and making those split-second decisions to have that impact within the game. So hopefully, if you've made it this far in the video, you have been enjoying it, and if you have, if you could do me a massive favour of liking the video so that it can spread to more people, and hopefully they'll enjoy it too or find it somewhat informative, that would be massively appreciated. But the key thing that we are about in this replay is one of the most important things possible, and that is positioning and making sure that you both are aggressive as well as passive when you need to be, especially when you're playing tanks that aren't necessarily the most flexible vehicles, so that you can come away with results that even tier 10s would be very, very happy with. And that's what we're going to see in this tier 7 tank destroyer, the SU-100M1. Of course, this tank does not get a turret. It is actually pretty limited on its hull kind of armor, as well as the fact that it also has a really annoying hull lock, such that you can't really arc your gun that far either. So you are definitely limited in this vehicle. Now, it is fast, so at least you can reposition, and that's why I wanted to showcase this gameplay the most as well, is that, you know, you saw a very aggressive push into the town which people would typically kind of fear about, and they'd usually go and snipe with this vehicle. But when you're in a top tier matchup like this, where you are the top tier tank and you're able to dominate opponents when you come up against them, then of course you'd want to make sure that you are on the forefront. And so even the game that you're playing in and the matchup that you're playing in can make a massive difference as to what you should be doing and how well the game is going to go. If you are in a bottom tier tank in this sort of matchup or this map, then maybe you would actually want to not push in at this aggressively, and so yeah, you could have a better game by staying backwards. Whereas when you are top tier like this, you're able to push in, you're able to find opponents and come away with some fantastic damage results and just be a nuisance to the enemy team, as well as supporting your team to push. And often a lot of people think that, you know, you are if you push in on your own, you're not going to be able to do anything. And actually, to a degree, you may be somewhat right, but actually a lot of the time, if you ping to your teammates or you make that aggressive push and you're not being completely stupid in trying to YOLO 5 tanks all at once to the point where your team don't have the time to push in with you, then yeah, I mean, you can still be very, very dominant, and you can actually make your team come with you as they realise that there's 5 tanks sat out in the open shooting 1 tank, so I may as well take advantage of it. So yeah, sometimes you can actually subconsciously impact your own team to make the move. And actually, if you ping in the chat as well what you're going to be doing, this can be very, very rewarding as well. But in this gameplay so far, 3,200 damage. But what you'll notice here is that the tanker here manages to realise that there's a lot of people in the centre of the map. There is still a ton of vehicles on the enemy team left alive, 10 to be precise, and so he needs to make a impact on the people in the centre, since they're going to be able to get shots on both the Skoda T25 and the 88 who is sat in the base. So what does he do? Well, he pushes towards them, but he doesn't push from down here, since that would open him up to all of the campers over here. So he makes sure that he doesn't necessarily open himself up to nobody and sits at the back of the map, but at the same time limits the amount of tanks that can shoot him. And this is something that a lot of people don't do, is that they will take the easiest route or the quickest route as to push forward and deal their damage. But in that point, you always end up taking way more shells, and then later in the game, when you may need those hit points, you're not going to have them, and that way you're not going to be able to reposition as you might hope. So preserving your hit points by using terrain is actually something that a lot of players don't use, and they'll just go the easiest route, like we've said. So what do you do in this sort of game? Well, the one thing that a lot of players should be doing is looking at the map, and this was one thing that I definitely didn't use to my full advantage when I first started playing World of Tanks, and that was because I guess you get caught up in trying to learn the gameplay that you don't actually use the thing that's right in front of you telling you what is going to likely happen. And so we could do a quick analysis of the map right here. Well, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work it out. Well, you're seeing there's a Caro P88 over in the kind of top of the map, literally the centre of the top of the map that's pushing towards the base. You're seeing that there's a few 88s and they've taken the centre of the map. So where are the rest of the enemy teams going to be? Well, of course, they're going to be over in the camping spot in A, B, and 1 and 2, which means that essentially you can act on that information to be able to push forward and get the extra bit of damage. And with 3,700 damage left in this game, there's definitely room to get some and get the max out of your games. And often you can actually overtake a lot of the people in where you need to be on your team to get the rest of the damage in the game, where they're maybe kind of faffing around, they don't understand where they should be, and pushing in and getting and farming the last few vehicles in the game. But luckily the SU-100 knew exactly where the enemy team were. He used the idea of putting terrain in between him and the rest of the enemy team's vehicles so that he doesn't take any hits when he pushes in, and then of course is able to farm up these tier 6 vehicles using the armor and of course being aggressive and tracking opponents at the same time, allowing him to get multiple shots in when they're not looking. And here you go, just the ultimate thing that you want to see at the end of the game when you've already had a very good game in a tier 7, just coming up against them being a nuisance. You can see here the Hummel on the enemy team looking a little bit sus, doesn't manage to pen, and unfortunately for him, he's going to be back in the garage along with the majority of this team that have also pushed in. But you know, here able to get not only the damage but also the assistance and come away with a decent chunk of blocked as well, avoiding taking a lot of hits and of course winning the game nonetheless as the game goes on. Yeah, just mopping up the damage, and yeah, a fantastic result in a tank that is usually not that flexible, and so positioning is super important. And of course, hopefully these tips that have been throughout this video and the different playstyles, of course they are relevant to all of the tanks that you play, but these are very good examples of what I thought was some good tips to get your damage and increase your damage, because I could tell you about one position on one map, but it's not really going to help you in the majority of scenarios. And so looking at a holistic overview of what you should be thinking about in the game is usually the best way that I learned, and the way in which that, you know, you're able to make your decisions better within the game and come away with the results that of course you're hopefully looking for, having searched and clicked on this video. Yeah, either way, if you did enjoy, make sure that you do subscribe, because there'll be plenty more of guide and tip videos that we'll be doing on the channel. And if you did like it, please, once again, do like this video, as it will help me out massively. And of course, it will let me know that you want to see more of this style of video. And thank you. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day, and hopefully you have a good result like you've seen in these games. Thank you. Goodbye.